now we have a panel on what does it mean to be human. I would like to invite up to our panelist stage Jeanine Thweatt, Braden Molhoek, Buckley Rue, and Fred DeFalco. And I will let them take over from here. Who's the moderator? You?
I think I am.
Okay, wonderful. Here, I'll let you have my mic.
So hi, everyone. I'm Jen, and unlike our first panel this morning, I don't know any of these guys. So our first order of business, I think, is to allow you guys to just say a brief word of introduction to our audience here. And then my plan is to, I have 3 or 4 seed questions that I'm going to toss out, and then I'm going to shut up and let you guys run in any direction you so choose. Yeah? They're like, I don't know. Okay, buckle up then. Okay. So I'm Jen. I'm moderating. Once upon a time, I wrote a book, but more importantly, a couple of years back, I met Micah at a conference, and so here I am moderating a panel. On to you.
My name is Braden Molhoek. As Ted alluded earlier, I also work at the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. I'm also an adjunct professor at the GTU and at Santa Clara University, where I teach graduate students in software ethics and bioengineering ethics.
I'm Fred DeFalco. It's great to be here. I call myself a recovering theologian since 2000. I've been on the wagon that long. In my full-time work, I'm a life coach, consultant, entrepreneur, own several businesses, and just a pleasure to be here. And Micah, what a fantastic job. I've been to many conferences in my 64 years, and I'll tell you what, this is fantastic.
My name is Buckley Rue. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas in religious studies with a minor in psychology. I'm an author. I contribute to a number of blogs, and I've just finished writing my first book. I'd just like to start by saying how grateful I am and humbled to be surrounded by so many open-minded and intelligent people. It's truly humbling. Thank you.
So I want to add my thanks to Mike, as I'm sure, and say I'm glad you guys are here, because I wouldn't want to tackle the question, what does it mean to be human, all by my lonesome. It's nice to have some support. Now, I want to see if I can narrow that down a little bit, because obviously in a half hour, we're not actually going to walk out of here and go to lunch, sort of like dusting our hands off with this question answered and solved for all time. So I think to concretize this a bit, I want to frame it by saying, in any interdisciplinary conversation, and transhumanism is always interdisciplinary, right? There's no way to talk about the ideas embedded in this discourse without always sort of invoking simultaneous disciplines. But one of the difficulties of any interdisciplinary conversation is just the basic difficulty of vocabulary. What do we mean by the words that we're using, and are we intending to refer to the same things even when we're using the same words? And I think the word human is one of those contested vocabulary items in that way. So is this a biological category? Is this an ontological category? Is this a moral category? Is it all of those things at once? But which one of those things do we mean when we use it? And is the word human within the context of transhumanism the same thing as the word human within the context of Christian theology? And if they're not identical, what are the differences and how do we connect across them? Go.
Okay. Well, first I would say that scientists don't agree about what it means to be human or what it means to be a species. There's at least 12 definitions of what that means. So I'm going to bracket that and say, as a theological ethicist, I say that what it means to be human includes several things. First is the vertical relationship between the human and the divine. Then the horizontal relationship between the self and the rest of creation. Thirdly, an ordered soul, so a right relationship within the self. Secondly, I would draw upon other theologians and say that there is both a transcendent or a spiritual aspect of human nature, but also a creaturely aspect. And so science can help us understand what it means to be human, but not entirely. I think I'll stop there for now.
Well, I agree with both of you so far. It's all the above, and I agree. From a personal experience, I would say, being a radical convert to Christianity when I was 18, when all the other my colleagues were either going to prison or dying at a very young age, I converted to Christianity. And being human is what I was not for the first 35 years of my Christian experience. And and when I come back, I'll share a couple just real practical stories of what it means to be human. And I just think it's a matter of being real. And it's knowing that it exists. And I'll give a few reference points to that when we come back.
What does it mean to be human? Okay, so there is as many different answers to that question as there are varieties of people interpreting it. René Descartes and Immanuel Kant both believed that meaning is something that we imply on the world, that we are giving to the world, whereas people like Thomas Aquinas and David Hume believed that meaning is something that we receive from the world. These are two answers as completely different as the philosophies of Thomas Aquinas and David Hume individually. For my own personal experience, the ideas I like to explore in my writing, I take my cue from that question from the neuroscientist John Lilly. John Lilly claimed to be at one point in contact with these extrasensory intelligences. And with his last experience with these things, he asked them, what does it mean to be human? And they responded to him, to laugh more. And so I got to thinking about that question, and I thought, what if not only does that have to say something about our humanity, what if that says something about the fabric of the universe in general? The idea that everything is one thing while being the simultaneous opposite other. That could explain the foundations of quantum mechanics and the idea that light behaves both as a wave and as a particle, a wavicle, if you will. I won't go into all that, but it also can explain how we are both mortal, finite beings, yet we bear the signature of the eternal within us. In considering this question, one thing that kind of got me thinking was Koko the Gorilla. Koko the Gorilla is not a human, but Koko the Gorilla is something that started to take place in humanity. Koko the Gorilla learned language, and I feel the way we could relate to her death recently, it was almost as though we lost a human. And while Koko isn't a human, we all kind of realized she bared some unique human aspects. You could say that looking at an embryo, they all look exactly alike at one point or another, and the only thing that really separates us from any of them is time. We bear every animal that ever came to be within us, and so to become transhuman, we're not necessarily shedding our humanity. We're still containing it within us, but we're becoming something else as well. And to the question of, does it look any different from a theological aspect as it does from a biological aspect, I would refer to alchemy. Alchemy began as a realization of something internal that they wanted to express externally. And I feel like transhumanism has become the revivification and the resurrection of the alchemist dream, as it was noted earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that comes to mind, I want to follow the Koko the Gorilla thread for a second, is Koko's not human if by human we intend a sort of strictly biological category, right, a designation. However, this animal is a social animal with which people we would call human biologically, right, had significant relationships with. This animal had a kind of social significance, hence the kind of grief around the passing. So is human the right category to use, or is it something more like person, if we mean that in a kind of socially significant way? So then how does the word human and the question, what does it mean to be human, relate to this other question of maybe is person the relevant category that we should be using in this discussion?
Well, you know, when I think of human, I think, of course, of the physical body. And just a few reference points that I'd like to point to is one, of course, the scriptures where Jesus said when the child came up to him and said to all the religious leaders and all those around him, he says, unless you become like one of these, you shall never see the kingdom of God. What do you mean by that? And, you know, they're real. I mean, kids are real, especially 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. I have plenty of grandchildren, and there's no greater joy than watching them be real and be themselves. It's only until they get about 5 and 6 and start believing what we told them, they start becoming unreal. One of the other reference points is that I'm a big studier and student of A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles says that the purpose of the body is for communication of that which is spiritual. And our body is given to us as a form of conversation, communication. So to be human is to engage in conversation, something I didn't do for my first 35 years of Christianity because I was so indoctrinated. And it was a great theology. I loved that box. I was more comfortable in that box than any box I've experienced since. However, I didn't have the joy and the peace and the understanding that I have now. And the other thing, A Course in Miracles says, a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is inevitable. And that's what we're having here, is we're having a universal experience right now, as long as Micah says, you engage in the conversation. Also, one more quote is that, you know, from A Course in Miracles, it says, nothing unreal exists, and anything real cannot be threatened. Herein lies the peace of God. So as humans, we're real. I mean, we're real. I can feel it. I can feel his energy sitting here. I can feel your energy. I felt your energy while you were presenting in the other energy. So being human is being real. And why are we here as humans? We're here to communicate, to have conversation, and mainly to love. And that's what it's all about, is to love. And one of the things that I keep on the back of my business cards, I just like to share about being human, is that it says, dear human, you've got it all wrong. You didn't come here to master unconditional love. That is where you came from and where you'll return. You came here to learn personal love, universal love, messy love, sweaty love, crazy love, broken love, whole love, infused with divinity, lived through the grace of stumbling, demonstrated through the beauty of messing up often. You didn't come here to be perfect. You already are perfect. You came here to be gorgeously human, flawed and fabulous, and then to rise again into remembering. But unconditional love, stop telling that story. Love, in truth, doesn't need any other adjectives. It doesn't require modifiers. It doesn't require the condition of perfection. It only asks that you show up, you do your best, that you stay present and feel fully, that you shine and fly and laugh and cry and hurt and heal and fall and get back up and play and work and live and die as you, the human. It's enough. It's plenty. And that poem is unknown, and I use it on the back of my business cards. And I've actually handed it to people, and they break down crying. They said, "Oh my God, where did this come from? Well, here's what I'm going through as a human experience right now, and I needed this." So that's my references.
I cannot see the clock, so when you guys are really hungry for lunch, you're just going to have to come forcibly take us by the elbow and march us out. Do you want to add a word?
Sure. I think personhood is a very important category if we're going to be talking about a possible future where humans exist with transhumans, enhanced humans, posthumans, multiple species, if you want to say that. But I do think that there is a human way to be a person, and there is something I think that is important about that standpoint that still deserves consideration in the conversation. But also with the term personhood, it raises similar questions that conversations around the image of God raise. What are we attaching that personhood to? So traditionally, the image of God is thought to be one of four ways. It's either substantive, it's something like our intellect. It's functional, the purpose that God gave us in the universe. Relational, just as the Trinity is relational, we're capable of relationships. Or selection, that like Israel, humans are a chosen species. And so I think when you raise the question of personhood, you also raise the question of how are we defining a personhood? What attribute or character are we assigning that personhood to?
Yeah, I want to pick up a thread. I mean, so many threads have been laid already so far this morning. The question of I versus we as our reference point. Micah spoke of relationality as the touchstone for getting a hold on this question of what it means to be human in this conversation. And certainly in Christian theology, interpreting what the Imago Dei means, what it means to be created in a relational sort of way is important. So I want to follow up on that and pull in this question too of embodiment and ask, as we're sort of playing this speculative kind of futuristic game, like what would a Christian eschatological, technologically informed future look like? If relationality is, for the sake of argument, the important thing about being human that we want to carry forward, then is there a way to take that and use it as our kind of ethical standpoint for here are the things we should do and here are the things we shouldn't do, and how does embodiment play into that? Are there changes that we should or shouldn't make to our bodies based on the point of embodiment? The point of humanness is relationality. Or let me put it this way: do we have to have bodies to be relational? That's better. Go.
So one of the founders of transhumanism actually was a Christian. His name was Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who had his first sort of visions of transhumanism during World War I. I mean, it's about exactly 100 years ago. It's a guy having, concrete visions of what humanity will look like in the future. And in his realization of this sort of idea, it's very much a realization of not only the transhuman, but an expression of God in time. I feel like insofar as something is not taking place in the conversation, it equally won't be expressed in the final product of what becomes transhumanism. And at the same time, we call God the infinite, we call God the all, but that is a being that is right now being born in time. And so I think that what a concrete version of transhuman might look like is something that is hyperconnected, something that is, in as much as it is possible, taking part in the conversation on all levels. And in doing so, you will come to not only express the absolution of what it means to become human, but you will also begin to express the transcendental, the infinite, the all, the God in time.
Well, I think that one of the things about transhumanists, and when you really become human, is when you don't see the humanity in the other person. You just see divinity. The yogis say namaste. And when I first heard that, when I first started taking yoga, okay, it's a cool thing. And then as I got deeper and deeper into my own spirituality, real spirituality, and not the theological spirituality, and I realized how impactful that is, and that every encounter is a divine encounter. And I don't care at this point, even the people who call me and solicit, I get a lot of solicitation to computerize. I'm even to the point where I love these people. I'm talking to these people, and I'm wondering what their family's like, the pre-recorded ones, and it's gotten that big where they don't even bother me anymore. It's just a divine encounter.
Okay,
So
but
that's
is it a divine encounter if it's just a bot?
A thought?
A bot.
Oh, a bot. There you go. But really, it's just that humanity is a part of the divinity, I think, because it is by God.
I think it's possible to have relationality without a body. I'm not sure I would necessarily consider that human, though. It's hard for me to envision what a human sense of relationality would be without the senses that we currently have. Now, are there things that we could do to enhance that? Sure. I mean, if I could see your body temperature or read your brain waves to see if you're actually listening to what I'm saying, if you're interested in what I'm saying, or if you want me to shut up, that's a different way that's giving me more information than I currently have. And that is a way to enhance relationality. Is it what we think of as human now? Maybe an extension of, but there is a point where that could exceed what we currently consider human.
I just to go off that for a second. Is it a divine encounter if it's a bot? I say yes. Is it a divine encounter if it's an ant? I say yes. Consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness extends to all things, even on the most subtle levels, even at the imperceptible levels. And so a big question that's arose in the development of AI is AI going to wipe out humanity? And I personally don't think so, because we are going to be the means through which consciousness is realized through artificial intelligence.
It's good. Thank you. Where did I want to go next? So one of the fundamental sort of tensions that I see within transhumanism actually turns on the perspective of what this category human means. That is, there's a way to read transhumanism where I'm going to use the phrase the human condition, where the human condition is really fundamentally negative in some ways, right? Limited, vulnerable, ultimately mortal, and all of this is not very nice. These are problems, and from the perspective of a sort of techno-optimistic stance, problems are things that we solve, right? We solve them with human innovation. We solve them with technology. So in this read, right, the human condition is, in essence, fundamentally negative. However, there is an entirely different way to read transhumanism as the sort of current instantiation of previous versions of Western humanism, where humans are celebrated as, sort of the pinnacle of creation. We are innovative. We are intelligent. We are the most successful dominant species on the planet. All of that, right? A sort of evolutionary progress read. In which case, the human condition is like, wowee, look at us. Both of those things are there in transhumanism, and not coincidentally, that same ambivalence is present in Christian theology, right? And Ted brought that to our attention somewhat as he kicked us off, that there's something beautiful about being created in the image of God, right? Co-creators, all of that. But at the same time, this pesky little doctrine of sin that we don't prefer to talk about unless a Lutheran theologian makes us. So the intersection of Christian theology and transhumanism then can go lots of different ways here. And part of how Christian theologians interact with transhumanism, whether it's a fundamental no or an embrace, has to do with which read of transhumanism they're embracing themselves on this question of, is the human condition something fundamentally limited and negative that we need to fix, or is the human condition something to be celebrated? There's not really a question in that. I'm sorry, guys. Just comment away in response.
Well, I think I don't know if we're at time, we're probably out of time, but 2 minutes. Okay, just quickly. I think one of the things that we, in the Christian influence, is that we got holy and holy mixed up. How do you spell holy? First thing you think of, most people say H-O-L-Y. Well, holy is also spelled W-H-O-L-L-Y. And once we get the fact that we've been made holy, just like Adam and Eve, we had sin. Well, with Christ, we have righteousness. We didn't have to do anything for it. Everyone has it. We're righteous. We're holy. As a human race, we're holy. But we're not W-H-O-L-L-Y yet. And that's where real, true transhumanism comes in, where that love, L-O-V-E, the one word everybody would define Jesus by if they only could choose one word is love. Once we realize is that we have been made holy, H-O-L-Y, and you can remove that from the spectrum. Now we just have to focus on the W-H-O-L-L-Y. And that's where true humanism will come in for the Christians. And not anymore, when I'm looking at you, wondering what your position, how I can maneuver in there, but really, really having that communication and that communion with every single person that we meet. And that they're already holy. I don't need to influence them. Even Mormon, Christian, Baptist, Methodist, whatever you are, Jewish, Jehovah's Witness, my friends, my relatives, they're all holy, H-O-L-Y. But none of us are W-H-O-L-Y. Right? That's what we always are moving to as humans.
It's a joke. It's a divine joke. As I was getting back to, both are present. Both are true. It is something. It's a problem and it's a celebration at the same time. Just because we transcend humanity, we become more than human, doesn't mean that problems will cease to exist. Life is infinite. New exciting problems will always arise.
Braden, I think you get the last word.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree that it's both aspects are prevalent there. Just because there's greater intellect does not mean there's going to be greater morality. The latest issue of Theology and Science just came out about genetic moral enhancement, and can we engineer virtue? I don't think we can. I think we can make people more moral. I think we can have a predisposition towards morality, but that doesn't mean that people are going to be virtuous. It sort of raises the bar as to what virtue is. And I'm going to push back and say that if we solve the problem of aging and death, then the accidental loss of life is that human situation even worse than the loss of 500 years, 1,000 years because of a car accident or murder. So I think there's ways in which the human condition can be exacerbated in the transhumanist context.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.